Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the first half of the 26th chapter in the book of Proverbs. We're going to take it all the way up to the 14th verse. It is a chapter of 28 verses, and before we do that, we just want to review what took place in the latter half of the 25th chapter. And no one theme predominates. What we do witness is themes that are expressed twice. There are three of them, the first of which is honey. We read of in the 16th verse. Have you found honey? Eat only as much as you need, lest you be satisfied with it and vomit. So this is a warning against excessive intake or excessive indulgence. Honey is not meant to be eaten as a meal, and if you eat enough, you will vomit, but it is sweet in small doses. But the trick and the key is to keep it, to enjoy it, is to keep everything in moderation. So too much honey is too much a bad thing. Just like making your foot rare in your neighbor's house. We're actually going to go to the 27th verse. This is the second one that speaks of honey. It is not good to eat much honey. Is it esteemed to seek one's own esteem? So that's a self-evident statement. Obviously, it's not good to eat too much honey. And it's followed by a rhetorical question. Is it esteemed to seek one's honor? And the obvious answer is no. It is better to have someone else brag and sing your praises and hosannas than if you are self-advertising yourself. When you become self-exalting, you become self-righteous. So it's far better to have other people do your talking for you than for you to talk on your behalf. The next two concepts pertain to neighborly relations, verses 17 and 18. Make your foot rare in your neighbor's house, lest he gets enough of you and hate you. So just like honey or anything else, there is such a thing as too much, an excess and a deficiency. The excess is overstaying your welcome, inviting yourself over, just treating your own neighbor's house like your own. There has to exist boundaries and barriers between neighbors, friendly as a rule, but not, they don't dwell in their own house. And if you do that enough, then he's going to have enough of you, and he's not going to like you, and the brotherly, neighborly love will be squandered through your own selfishness. A club and a sword and a sharp arrow is a man bearing false witness against his neighbor. So false witness is a sin in the Decalogue. It's the 8th or 9th one. And you can bear false witness in court or out of court. This is just gossiping or repeating slander or innuendo about your neighbor. It's a deadly weapon comparable to a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow, each of which are devastating and deadly. And 21 and 22 teach of the principle of loving your enemies. There is a misnomer that this concept and theme is unique to the New Testament, but there is a passage in the book of Job and also First Chronicles and in the 24th chapter as well as in the 25th. We're going to focus on the 25th. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to eat. This is counterintuitive logic from the natural man's perspective and calculation, because an enemy is one you want to harm and hinder. You don't want to feed, aid, and abet and enable it to gather its strength and nourishment, because they're going to come and harm you. So why would one do this to an enemy? And it is, if you treat an enemy like a friend, you might just win a friend. So, have some mercy when your enemy is hungry or thirsty. Step in and provide it, and you may make a friend out of the enemy. That's the obvious goal. It is better to have friends than enemies. Of course, without friends, life would be meaningless. Without enemies, life would be dull as hell. But there are definite do's and don'ts governing how we are to treat our enemies. For you are heaping coals of fire on his head, and Yahweh rewards you. So the all-seeing, all-knowing eye in the sky, that is Yahweh El Shaddai, he sees what you do, and the enemy who accepts it and exploits it or abuses your generosity, they are heaping coals of fire on their head if they persist in treating you like an enemy and acting like an enemy to you. But you have a powerful ally in the sky, and he is the one who rewards you accordingly. He sees what you do, he knows what you do, and he will reward you accordingly for what you do. So we are commanded to love our enemies, and that is naturally impossible, but supernaturally so. Now marks the beginning of the lesson itself, chapter 26, verse 1. Like snow in summer and rain in harvest, so is esteem not fitting for a fool. So in the months of June through September, there is seldom any rain in the land of Palestine. That is the harvest season, and summer takes place in between, and you're not going to find snow. It rarely, if ever, snows in summer. And so as much as these elements, these forms of precipitation are unbefitting for certain seasons of the year, so too is esteem unbefitting and unbecoming for a fool, because what's a fool going to do with esteem? He's going to bask in it, acclaim it, indulge extremely in it, and he's going to squander the esteem that has been given to him. So we should give our honor to honorable men, not foolish people who will not make the use and we will regret our investment in bestowing honor upon such a one. As a bird wanders and a swallow flies about, so a curse without cause does not come. So a curse is meaningless and emptiness. It's meaningless and empty if your curse is not blessed. So there is such a thing as imprecatory prayer. That is when we pray for when we pray for curses to befall on our enemies. And we witness a form of this recently with 1,000 witches, real-life day modern witches, who gathered to cast a spell on President Trump, but their curse is not blessed. And many morally misguided, spiritually stupid, and religiously retarded Christians are actually praying imprecatory prayers against our president, and he is the best friend we have as Christians, at least since Ronald Reagan. So if you are against Trump, you are against God. A whip for a horse, and a bridle for a donkey, and a rod for the fool's back. These things are all fitting and appropriate. The fool is wayward and wild and undomesticated, much as a horse, which has the potential to be domesticated, as does a donkey, but they spring from wild ancestors and wild origins, and within every domesticated beast is a beast waiting to be unleashed and get out. So you have to beat it into them by force. You have to instill the discipline to domesticate these wayward, wandering, carnal creatures. So rods are fitting and appropriate for a fool's back, inasmuch as a whip. Now, the horses we use for whips are exponentially stronger than the ones we use on humans. And a bridle for a donkey, that's just a way of controlling its maneuvering. So physical force is necessary to move and domesticate and discipline carnal creatures. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you also become like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he become wise in his own eyes. So this is actually two verses. This is verses 4 and 5, and the contradiction is not real. It's only apparent. So there are certain situations, and this is when the virtue of discernment, we need to know when to combat a fool and his foolishness and when to just let them have the last word and don't even indulge, because we will sink to their level. There are several arguments out there, such as there is no such thing as objective or absolute truth. All truth is relative, but that very statement, all, invalidates the premise of the school of thought of relativity. And there are several others. There's Darwinian, communism, Islam, just all these schools of thought that demand to be counteracted in open and honest public forum debate. But that there comes a time in private when a fool who just wants to talk to be heard. There is such a creature out there, and these are the fools we must pay no heed, no mind to. But when if a smart person is defending a foolish principle, that's when we are obliged to step up to the plate and defend the truth without apology and without worry about who we might offend. Just because itching ears will not endure sound doctrine does not absolve us of the responsibility to proclaim it boldly and without fear. He who sends a message by the hands of a fool cuts off his feet, drinks violence. So messengers and couriers of message were necessary in Solomon's royal system. He had a kingdom to rule, and because there was no instant communication in the ancient world and up until all the way to very modern times, the only way to communicate with someone was to physically deliver them in writing or send someone to verbally communicate the message, and a fool would not be could not be entrusted to such a task because they will bungle it, they will foul it up, and if you rely on such a one, you are cutting off your feet and you are inviting violence into your own life because you couldn't get your message or vital information communicated. So to be a courier was a position of responsibility and trust. So much of what needed to be communicated was relying on a single individual in the ancient physical system of physically traveling with information communicated. The legs of the lame hang limp. So is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. So a fool might recite a proverb, or he might even regurgitate it, but it's coming from them. They're not going to know what they mean. So, don't let a fool teach a Bible class or a Bible study, because a proverb coming out of their mouth is likened to an impotent leg, a leg that hangs limps. Legs of the lame, these are physically handicapped from the waist down. And so the same ineffectiveness and intellectual inertia will come from entrusting a fool to expound on proverbs or to elaborate or to, that best they can recite them and regurgitate them. They cannot apply them, they cannot interpret them, they cannot teach them. Like one binding a stone in a sling, so is he who gives esteem to a fool. So that's the second time we read that combination, that concept or combinations of words, esteem, fitting for a fool. Esteem is not fitting for a fool, we read of in 26:1b. And here we just read that anyone who gives esteem to a fool is like binding a stone in a sling. If a stone is in a sling, that means it's ready to go, and all you have to do is release it, and then it'll hit the damage. But you are doing a boomerang effect with that sling. It's coming right back to you. So you are loading the own gun. You're putting the bullet in the own gun in your own Russian roulette when you take a chance by giving esteem and honor to a fool, because you are lending your name and by connection your reputation to their reputation and their name, and you wouldn't want to squander a thing as precious as that. Although reputation, I feel, is overrated. Only a worthless coward values their own reputation or anyone else's above their character, but it still is useful. We shouldn't have bad reputations merely for the sake. We shouldn't encourage or do anything to encourage. It's going to be inevitable, because we who are walking righteous will endure the persecution of the world. They're going to make stuff up about us. They're going to resort to libelous claims, but that's just one of the things we have to take with grace and humility. A thorn goes into the hand of a drunkard, so is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. So a proverb is actually quite dangerous in the mouth of a fool, no more than a drunkard who is physically clumsy and careless because of their state of stupidity, which drinking induces. Handling a thorn, they're going to be injured. They're not going to maybe feel it right then and there, but they're going to wake up tomorrow, and that thorn is going to leave a mark and leave a sting. So if you entrust a fool to recite or teach proverbs, that's going to cause as much damage to the audience as a drunk man intoxicated with alcohol with a thorn in his hand. An archer who wounds anyone is he who hires a fool or any passerby. So employers and people who offer work have to exercise that same virtue of discernment and discretion that we who are apologetics and evangelists for the faith have to answer fools according to their folly. There are certain situations when if we sink to their level, we're only becoming more like them, but we don't want them to get away with the last word, because there are clever people out there making foolish and supporting and defending foolish arguments. But to return to this, an employer, you can't hire fools or just people at random passing by. That's a generally bad practice. And once more, you are inflicting your own wound, because your project and your enterprise are the ones who are going to suffer from your own careless lack of discernment and discretion in selecting who you hired. As a dog returns to his own vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Earlier in the 23rd chapter, we read that, or 22nd maybe, but we read that a drunk returns to the alcohol. They always seek an alcoholic seeks the next alcoholic fix. This is comparable to one who is a sinner returns to their sin. They do not repent. They are not convicted. They just go it as a matter of course. And this is quoted by Peter in the New Testament in the second epistle, which bears his name, the 2nd chapter, 22nd verse. The effects of following false teachers, they're going to lead you into a ditch again and again, much as a dog will physically consume the waste that he just vomited out. A dog does not have the discernment to know that it's not healthy food, but they don't know any better, and so do certain fools. If they are repeating the same acts and species of foolishness over and over again, then they are no different from a dog who is eating his own vomit. Have you seen a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. So human wisdom is largely an illusion. True wisdom consists in an awareness of one's own ignorance. The wise person, the truly wise person, will know just how little they know, whereas the vain, puffed up, and conceited, and arrogant, and haughty intellectual think they know it all. They have a know-it-all and an entitled mentality, entitled disposition, and a know-it-all mentality. But a fool who has the blank slate, there is redemptive potential in a fool who is at least doesn't aspire to the claims and plaudits of possessing true wisdom. From that blank slate, there is more potential for him than one who has the barrier of the illusion of his own intelligence. So being wise in our own eyes, our eyes are not the determining qualifying factor of who is and what isn't wisdom. So, of course, we sound wise to ourselves, but before divinity, we are abject fools in need of his wisdom. And this corresponds to the philosophical precept of Socratic ignorance. One of the oracles at Delphi told Socrates he was the wisest man living, and Socrates, being a skeptic by nature, set out to investigate this claim. And he visited the various classes, the artisans, the poets, the generals, and they all knew knowledge respective to their crafts, but Socrates claimed that he knew nothing. So from that blank slate, he confirmed the oracle of the Delphi. The lazy one says, "There is a lion in the way, a fierce lion is in the street." Now, we read that excuse and we read that's ridiculous. There are no lions in cities. They are in the wild, but the fool will conjure up any insane excuse to avoid working. So they don't want to leave their home. There's a lion in the way. He's in the streets. He's going to devour them. These are hungry carnivores that will eat them if they step outside and do the work they should be doing in the first place, which they are neglecting because they are lazy. And he who, to quote Benjamin Franklin, he who is good at making excuses is seldom good at or for anything else. So when you become a habitual excuse maker, you come to rely on them, and you just become more creative in your conception of them. But you're not doing anyone, society, or yourself, or anyone living a favor by persisting in your excuse making. A door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy one turn on his bed. So a door revolves around its hinges much in the same way that the lazy one gravitates to his bed. They cannot get enough sleep. They will sleep the day away for their own comfort, because their own comfort and own immediate pleasure, gratification, and luxury is more important than investing for that which can buy longer-term security and luxury. But they are too lazy. They live like aristocrats even though they are poor, and so they invite greater poverty on themselves. There are definite consequences for being lazy. It would be an oversimplification to suggest that all poor people are lazy, but most lazy people are poor. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Take care until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.